Hey everyone, welcome to Clickheads. I'm Eddie the Chump, and today we're going to be talking about peeker's advantage, how to best deal with it, and what you can do when taking or receiving peeks from enemy players to set yourself up for success. The first topic we need to cover is you need to understand the difference between peeker's advantage, which is a byproduct of the online environment, and angle advantage, which is present both online and on LAN. Dying instantly to a peek that seems impossible to deal with may feel like a result of peekers, especially if the player peeking you has significantly higher ping than you in the server, but angle advantage may also be working against you, especially if you're more of a beginner or intermediate player, as at those tiers it's much more common to sit passively and wait for an opponent to walk into you in situations where that is a bad idea. There are times you do want to do that, of course, but we'll talk more about that later. So first up, let's talk about what angle advantage actually is, as you'll have to deal with that in whatever scenario you're planning to play in, online or off. Angle advantage is a byproduct of how your character sees the physical world in game. The camera view that you see from the first person is physically locked to the center of your character's face in game, and almost exactly like real life, your proximity to walls or surfaces can obscure your vision in ways you might not immediately think of. The basic rule of thumb is, the closer you are to a surface, the less time you will have to react if someone peeks you, and vice versa. The further away you are, the more time you have to react on both sides of a peek. Let's look at some examples. In this first one, I am right in a short corner watching for Liam to walk into my crosshairs, but from his screen, he is further away from the critical angle. He can actually begin to see my character's model before I see him at all. You can die without ever seeing someone if you play your angles incorrectly, and it's this angle advantage that you might be dying to over and over again. This principle is the same throughout every map and object in the game, so you really need to start understanding how you're peeking and defending them. For example, something that a lot of inexperienced players do is shift walk round a corner with bad crosshair placement and die to someone before they can even react. This is why beginners sit in corners in the first place, because it does work at their level, but the further up the skill curve you go, players will not be taking peeks like this. Let's look at two real world examples. On Ascent, there are two peeks that you can take at the beginning of the round that display angle advantage to a huge degree. One is peeking cat from B spawn, and the other is peeking mid from A spawn. If you're attacking, the cover is much closer to you than it is to the defender, which is why you often see op players holding these angles on defense. Just by the nature of angle advantage, the defenders will see you first, which is why you might be dying to these angles often. You're simply too close to the wall or box compared to them. Now, peeker's advantage might come into play here in your favor, but at best it makes the fight even. I regularly shut down early aggression from cat with an op because of this. In reality, you should not be challenging angles like this naked, as in without a flash or smoking it off, etc. Another example is mid on Haven. As the attackers, if you challenge window, you need to know that the defenders are miles away from the angle and have massive angle advantage on you, especially if they're on top of B box with, say, a jet using an op. Angle advantage is always working for or against you depending on how you navigate the maps, and you need to be conscious of it whenever possible. Now that that's out of the way, let's cover actual peeker's advantage and how to play around that. Peeker's advantage happens as a result of the network round trip in online games. Even if players are on the same ping and equidistant from a piece of cover, the player who peeks first has a small advantage. If the peeking player has higher ping and the lag is asymmetrical, it can get even worse. This can stack with natural angle advantage to give someone a huge step up against you if you're standing in the wrong place. So what can you do about it? Well, the simple answer is play in a way so that you're always the one seizing that peek, not the other way around, even on defense. That does not mean, however, aggressively peek every angle all the time. That's a sure way to feed. But it does mean when you think a gunfight is about to take place, either through sound cues or player callouts or utility flying at you, don't wait for an enemy that knows where you are to peek you, especially if you're playing an on angle. Watching this clip from Liam, notice how he is not passively holding an angle, he's always moving, effectively jiggle picking it. Statically holding angles is very difficult or next to impossible in Valorant Online sometimes, and it's a big beginner mistake. So what Liam is doing is trying to negate that initial peek advantage by being the peeker himself while still trying to keep himself relatively safe. Let's go back and explain something. What's an on angle, Eddie, and how does it differ from an off angle? To talk about this, I need a visual aid. Oh, here we are. Let's look at this simplified example. An on angle is an angle that a peeking player will immediately see on their entry to any geometry. Say we have our room here and there's a door to the left placed here. When approaching this doorway, the on angles are the first ones you see as you enter the room. So here we have our Brim entering from the left with Jet and Phoenix playing both on angles. If you just sat on either of these, like the Jet or Phoenix are in this example, a good player might even pre-fire as he peeked these because they're obvious on angles. They're the first things you see and check clear. The areas highlighted in red are outside of those on angles. This is what an off angle essentially is, and making use of them intelligently is one of the ways you can combat peeker's advantage. The reason for this is, when peeking on angles, the peeker is at minimized risk if they have good crosshair placement and are diligently pre-aiming. To check off angles, the player has to expose themselves to much higher risk by moving further into any space, potentially losing those precious frames of advantage and pre-aim. I'll show you a real in-game example. Let's look at mid on Haven. As the attackers, the on angles from either side of the doorway are these ones. The boxes either side of the door are off angles because the attackers have to move into sight to check them, exposing themselves to risk. Now, one thing to remember about off angles is that quite a lot of the time you might gain a surprise advantage, but your options for escape are limited. If you played either of these on-site off angles on your own and a team came in force, you would likely get one kill and get traded out. The secret to playing them is to play them with help, usually from a player not peeking at all who peeks on your contact. As in, when you start shooting and everyone's attention is on you, they peek from somewhere else and shoot people in the side of the head. This is not to say that you cannot play on angles at all, you can, but remember, peeker's advantage is at its most ferocious when it stacks upon natural angle advantage. So angles like cat on ascent are usually playable because your on position has advantages in geometry that naturally counteracts the attacker's peek. If there's one thing I want you to take away from this video, it's that yes, peeker's advantage is pretty obnoxious at times, but really the advantage doesn't just stem from the extra frames you get from it, it's also a matter of player initiative. A lot of more casual players look at Valorant gameplay and say, oh, it's just a game for passive players, a campus paradise. Well, you can certainly get easy kills on people looking in the wrong direction, sure, but the best online players aren't passive all the time, or hardly at all, actually. They use every piece of info they can get to take the initiative. Don't forget, peeker's advantage works both ways. It's not just an attacker's phenomenon. Rather, it's a factor of dueling in general, whenever and wherever that happens. The process of taking duels at the right time is both a mechanical thing, jiggle peeking a defensive angle or having great crosshair placement, etc., and a game sense skill set. How many players are next to you? What utility are they using? How close is the cover to them or yourself? How can I time my peek to best wrong foot them? There will of course be matches where the connection is just against you. It happens to me and Liam, it will happen to you too. But the best players don't just accept a phenomena like peekers is in the game and just give up. They adapt their game, how they hold angles, how they counter peek, and how they try to take the initiative. To really improve at the game, you will have to do this too. I hope what we've discussed and shown today will help you with that. And that's about it for right now. I really hope you enjoyed the video. If you like the content on this channel, please hit that subscribe button and click the bell icon so you get notified when we upload. Also, please check out our Facebook stream. We're no lifing Valorant over there right now. It would be great to see some of you in the chat. Until next time.